Hey guys, welcome back to Sleeping Stone Whispers. Tonight's story gently drifts through the sounds of family life before electricity, a time when homes were filled with slow footsteps, soft voices, crackling fires, and long, peaceful silences. There are no sudden moments here, only the quiet rhythm of ordinary family life unfolding hour by hour. If you let yourself stay with this story, you may notice your breathing slow as each familiar sound fades into rest. So settle in, give this video a like, subscribe to Sleeping Stone Whispers, and allow these calm, forgotten sounds to carry you gently into sleep. Morning did not arrive with a sound that demanded attention. There was no sharp ring, no glowing number changing its shape, no reason to hurry. Morning simply happened. It came quietly, the way a thought drifts in while someone is still half asleep, not fully formed, not urgent, just present. Before electricity, before clocks told people what time it was, the day began when the house itself decided it was ready. The air shifted first. Cool night air slowly warmed, just enough to be noticed by skin beneath thin blankets. Breathing deepened. Sleep loosened its hold without resistance. Somewhere outside, a bird made a single sound. Not loud. Not important. Just enough to exist. It was answered later by another bird, farther away, and then by nothing at all. Silence returned, comfortable and unbroken. Inside the house, bodies remained still. A family slept together under the same roof, each person wrapped in their own quiet. There was no shared moment of waking yet. No agreement that the day had begun. Only the slow, natural drifting toward awareness. The wooden beams above them held the coolness of night. The walls, made of stone or packed earth, released stored cold little by little. The house breathed in its own way, expanding softly as the temperature changed. A faint creak might have come from somewhere deep within the structure, but it was not alarming. It was familiar. It had been heard every morning for years. Someone turned over in their sleep. Fabric brushed against fabric. A mattress filled with straw or wool shifted slightly, producing a muted rustle. Then stillness again. Morning, in those days, did not belong to minutes. It belonged to light. A thin line of pale brightness slipped through a crack in the shutter or the edge of a curtain. It rested on the floor without moving, waiting. Dust in the air floated lazily through it, invisible unless caught at the right angle. Eventually, eyes opened, not all at once, not together. One person woke simply because sleep was finished. There was no reason. The body had rested enough. That was all. They lay still for a while, listening. There was always listening first. The quiet was never empty. It was layered. A distant animal moving somewhere beyond the walls. The soft sigh of another person breathing. The gentle hum of the world existing without being observed. No one checked the time. There was no time to check. The person sat up slowly. Joints moved without complaint, but without speed. Feet touched the floor, cool and solid. The sensation grounded them fully into the day. They paused there, seated at the edge of the bed, allowing themselves to arrive. Standing came next. A stretch that was not intentional, just necessary. Arms lifted slightly. Shoulders rolled once. The body adjusted itself like a tool being picked up after resting overnight. Footsteps followed, soft, careful, well-known. The floorboards recognized them. Each step landed where it always had. The house knew this pattern. In another room, someone else stirred. Not awake yet. Just moving toward it. Morning sounds remained few. A door opening slowly so its hinge would not complain. The faint brush of cloth being straightened. A quiet cough, quickly subdued. Outside, light grew wider. Colors existed again, though softly. Nothing shone. Everything waited. The first task of the day was not work. It was preparation. Not preparation for productivity, but for presence. Water needed to be fetched. Fire needed to be woken. The house needed to be gently encouraged into movement. A pot was lifted, its weight familiar. It touched a surface with a dull, reassuring sound. Not sharp. Not metallic. Just there. The fire from the night before still held warmth beneath ash. Someone knelt and breathed life back into it with slow patience. A small sound emerged, wood responding, embers shifting. It was not a dramatic crackle yet. Just a promise. As the fire strengthened, light inside the room changed. Shadows softened. Corners became visible. The day entered the house fully, without announcement. Others woke now, one by one. No signal passed between them. No shared alarm. Each body followed its own rhythm, yet they gathered naturally, like streams joining a river. Voices were low when they came. Words were few. There was no need to explain the morning. Everyone understood it already. A child rubbed their eyes. An elder moved more slowly, but with certainty. Someone sat near the fire, warming their hands. Someone else reached for a cup, filling it with water drawn earlier. The house was awake, but still quiet. There was no rush because there was no race. The day stretched wide ahead, unmeasured and patient. Tasks would be done when they were done. Meals would happen when hunger arrived. Rest would come again when light faded. Morning without clocks did not belong to schedules. It belonged to sensation. The smell of warming earth. The feel of stone beneath bare feet. The sound of breath in a shared space. The subtle understanding that the day had begun, and that was enough. As the sun climbed higher, more sounds would come. Chores, voices, movement. But for now, morning remained gentle. Unclaimed. Unhurried. And in that calm beginning, the family moved slowly forward, guided not by numbers or bells, but by light, habit, and the quiet agreement between their bodies and the world around them. The day was awake. And so were they. The wooden floor was never truly silent. Even in the deepest part of the night, it held sound inside itself, waiting. At dawn, when weight returned to the house, the floor responded, not loudly, not suddenly, but with a series of soft acknowledgments. Each plank had learned the family. It knew where feet would land. It recognized the difference between a careful step and a hurried one, though hurried steps were rare in the early morning. At dawn, movement was respectful. People walked as though the house were still sleeping. The first foot touched the floor slowly. The wood was cool, carrying the night within it. The sound it made was low and muted, a gentle creak that rose and faded without echo. It was not a complaint. It was a greeting. That sound moved through the room and settled. Nothing reacted to it. No one startled. The floor had spoken in that way for years. Another step followed. Then another. The rhythm was uneven, human. The wood responded differently to each place where pressure met grain. Some boards were older, worn smooth by decades of mornings just like this one. Others were newer, still learning how to bend and release. The house listened. In the hallway, the sound changed. The floor there carried footsteps farther, though still softly. A child shifted in their bed nearby, not awake, but aware enough to turn over and continue sleeping. The sound did not interrupt rest. It blended into it. Bare feet made a different noise than wrapped ones. Skin against wood created a quiet drag, almost like a whisper. Slippers produced a duller sound, softer still. Each variation added to the language of the house. The person walking paused for a moment. Weight shifted from one foot to the other. The floor answered with a faint, delayed creak, as though thinking before speaking. Then silence again. Light from the rising sun stretched across the boards, revealing small imperfections. Scratches from chairs, marks from years of use, slight gaps where seasons had caused the wood to expand and contract. These marks were not flaws. They were records. Another door opened. Its movement sent a small vibration through the floor. The boards reacted, barely noticeable unless listened for. The house adjusted itself around the change. More feet joined the morning. One set heavier, slower. Another lighter, quicker, but still careful. The wooden floor held them all. It did not rush them. It did not resist. It simply responded. In the kitchen area, the sound deepened. Thicker boards carried weight differently. A chair was pulled back just enough to sit. Its legs slid rather than scraped, guided by habit. The sound was soft and short, ending as soon as it began. A pot was placed on the floor briefly, then lifted again. The wood accepted the contact and released it without comment. Everything moved with familiarity. These sounds were never discussed. No one thought about them. They were as ordinary as breathing. Yet they shaped the feeling of the morning more than any spoken word. The gentle noise of wooden floors at dawn told everyone who was awake, without needing to say so. It confirmed presence. It reminded the family that they were not alone, even in silence. As the morning progressed, the sounds would grow louder. Shoes would replace bare feet. Steps would quicken. Chairs would move more often. But this early sound, the first conversation between body and floor, belonged only to dawn. Eventually, the floor grew still again. Everyone had reached where they needed to be for the moment. The house settled into a pause. Light continued to move across the boards, slowly erasing the shadows made by footsteps that had already passed. The wooden floor rested, holding the memory of each step until the next one came. And the morning continued, quietly. Before walls divided sleep into private rooms, before doors closed out sound, families rested together. Shared bedrooms held more than bodies. They held rhythm. They held breath. In the early hours of morning, breathing was the loudest sound in the room, though it was still very soft. Each person breathed in their own way. Some breaths were deep and steady, moving without pause. Others were shallow, uneven, rising and falling like a slow tide. The room was dark, but not empty. Shapes existed in familiar places. Beds lined the walls. Mats rested on the floor. Blankets lay heavy with warmth gathered through the night. In the stillness, every breath mattered. One person exhaled through their mouth, a faint sound of air passing over lips. Another breathed through their nose, quieter, more contained. A child's breathing was lighter, quicker, sometimes pausing briefly before continuing again. These sounds overlapped without effort. No single breath stood out. Together, they formed a gentle pattern, constant and reassuring. Someone shifted in their sleep. Fabric brushed against skin. Breathing changed slightly, then returned to its earlier pace. The room adjusted around it. Shared bedrooms taught patience. No one owned the silence. Everyone belonged to it. A cough might appear suddenly, soft but unavoidable. It passed without comment. Sleep continued. In the corner of the room, an elder slept with measured breaths, slower than the others. Each inhale seemed deliberate, as though counted by the body itself. The sound carried a sense of weight, of years lived and days repeated. Nearby, two children slept close together. Their breathing often fell into the same rhythm without intention. Inhale together. Exhale together. Then separate again. Then return. The air in the room warmed gradually. Bodies shared heat. Breath circulated, rising and falling, moving invisibly between sleepers. The room breathed with them. Morning approached without urgency. Light had not yet entered fully. The room remained in its nighttime shape, guided by sound rather than sight. Someone woke briefly, not enough to move. Eyes opened, then closed again. Breathing changed for a moment, deeper, more aware, before settling back into sleep. There was comfort in knowing others were there. The sound of breath confirmed it. No words were needed. No reassurance spoken. As dawn drew closer, breathing began to shift. Some breaths grew deeper, fuller. Others became irregular, signaling the approach of waking. Still, the room remained quiet. No one tried to be silent. No one needed to. The shared space accepted every sound without judgment. Eventually, one person inhaled sharply and sat up. Their breath became audible for a moment. Others did not wake. The room held both sleep and wakefulness at the same time. The person remained still, listening. The breathing around them continued, steady and calm. It was not time to disturb it. Quiet breathing in shared bedrooms was not something people noticed while it lasted. It was simply the way nights ended and mornings began. A few more minutes passed. Light began to soften the darkness. Breathing changed again, slowly, naturally. Soon, footsteps would replace breath as the dominant sound of the house. But for now, the room remained filled with the simplest noise of all. Life continuing, quietly. The first footsteps of the house did not announce themselves. They arrived carefully, as though testing the morning before committing to it. One foot touched the floor, then paused, allowing the body to adjust. The second followed, slower than necessary, but unhurried. These footsteps belonged to no particular person. Over time, they all sounded the same. Soft. Familiar. Expected. The floor received the weight without surprise. A muted creak answered, low and brief, then settled back into stillness. The sound moved through the house and disappeared into its corners. Whoever took those first steps moved with intention but without direction. There was nowhere urgent to go. The house itself was the destination. A hallway carried the sound a little farther. Walls shaped it, not amplifying, but guiding it gently along. In a nearby room, someone turned over, acknowledging the sound without waking fully. Bare feet brushed the surface of the floor. The contact produced a faint sliding noise, barely audible. Each step was placed where it had been placed countless mornings before. Memory guided movement more than sight. The footsteps paused. Weight shifted. The floor responded with a delayed creak, like a quiet thought forming. Then silence returned. A door was opened slowly. Its hinge made no complaint. The sound of footsteps changed as the space changed, becoming slightly deeper in the larger room beyond. Another set of footsteps joined, lighter this time. They approached, stopped, then turned back. No words passed between them. None were needed. The house woke in pieces. A corner here. A room there. Each step stitched the spaces together. The sound of movement remained gentle. Nothing was dropped. Nothing hurried. Even the act of walking seemed deliberate, respectful of the quiet that still lingered. As light strengthened, footsteps grew more frequent. Still soft, still careful, but no longer alone. The house now recognized the day. The first footsteps faded into many, and the morning continued, slowly. The well waited in the same place it always had. It did not belong to morning or evening. It belonged to need. When someone approached it at dawn, the air around it felt cooler, heavier, as though night still rested there. A hand reached for the rope. The fibers were rough and familiar, worn smooth in the places most often held. The rope moved slowly, uncoiling with a soft, dry sound as it slipped over wood and stone. The bucket began its descent. There was no rush. Letting it fall too quickly would splash, would disturb the water below. So it went down at a patient pace, guided by steady hands. As it lowered, the sound changed. The scrape of rope against the well's edge softened, then faded. A quiet hollow echo replaced it, deep and distant. The bucket continued downward until the rope went slack. For a moment, there was only stillness. Then came the faintest sound of contact, water meeting wood. A dull, gentle splash, contained and calm. The bucket filled slowly. No one could see it, but everyone knew the sound. It was the same every morning. Reliable. Unchanging. The rope tightened again as the bucket was drawn upward. The sound returned, steady and rhythmic. Pull. Pause. Pull. Pause. Each movement produced a small response from the well, as though it were breathing along with the person above. Muscles worked without strain. This was a motion learned early and repeated often. The body knew exactly how much effort to use. As the bucket rose, water inside shifted slightly, producing a muted slosh that never escaped the wood. Drops clung to the outside, sliding down slowly, disappearing into the earth below. The final lift brought the bucket level with the ground. It rested there for a moment, suspended, water settling inside it. The rope creaked softly under the weight, then stilled. Hands grasped the handle. The bucket was set down gently, not with a thud, but with care. The sound was low and final. Water drawn from the well always sounded this way. It did not change with mood or weather. It asked only for patience. The morning accepted the sound and moved on, quietly. Clay pots and bowls rested where they had been placed the night before. They waited on shelves, on low tables, on the packed earth near the hearth. They did not shine. Their surfaces were dull, marked by use, shaped by hands long familiar with their weight. When morning reached them, it did so gently. A hand lifted the first bowl. Its movement caused a faint sound as it brushed against another. Not a sharp strike, but a soft clink, rounded and calm. The sound carried no urgency. It ended almost as soon as it began. The bowl was set down again, this time on a wooden surface. Clay met wood with a quiet, solid tone. It was a sound that belonged to work about to begin, not work being rushed. Another pot was moved. Its lid shifted slightly, producing a dry, hollow tap as clay touched clay. The lid was adjusted, settled into place with care. Silence followed. These sounds were small, but they filled the room. They signaled that the house was awake enough to begin preparing food, enough to move from rest into routine. A stack of bowls was separated slowly. Each one released from the next with a faint sound, like breath leaving the body. None of them struck hard enough to ring. Hands prevented that. The person handling them knew exactly how much pressure to use. Clay could chip if treated carelessly. Years of use had taught respect. A pot was lifted to be filled with water. As it passed another vessel, their rims touched briefly. The sound was light and rounded, almost soft enough to be imagined. Someone else reached for a cup. It was smaller, lighter, and made a quieter sound when set down. The difference was noticed without thought. The room slowly filled with these gentle noises. Not many at once. One, then another. Each sound separated by silence. No one spoke while the pots and bowls were moved. Words would have felt too sharp. The clay asked for quiet. As the morning continued, the vessels found their places. Some near the fire. Some near the table. Some held water, others grain. Each one settled with a final, soft sound that meant it would not be moved again for a while. The clinking faded. Stillness returned. The house accepted the quiet again, holding the memory of clay touching clay, and the day moved forward, slowly. Breakfast did not begin at a certain time. It began when the house felt ready for it. Hunger arrived gently, without demand, and preparation followed just as slowly. The fire had already been coaxed into life. Its warmth spread quietly, not yet strong enough to crackle loudly. Someone added a small piece of wood. It settled into place with a soft sound, and the flame adjusted itself. Ingredients were gathered without haste. Grain was measured by feel, not by number. A handful taken, then another, until it seemed right. Nothing was checked twice. Experience guided the motion. A pot was placed near the fire. It met the stone with a dull, patient sound. Water from the well was poured in slowly, producing a low, steady tone as it filled the vessel. The sound ended naturally when the pot was full enough. Stirring came next. A wooden spoon moved through the mixture in wide, unhurried circles. The sound it made was soft and repetitive, barely louder than breathing. Each turn was the same as the last. No one stood waiting for breakfast to be finished. People moved in and out of the space, pausing when needed, returning when called by habit rather than instruction. A child watched quietly, sitting nearby. There were no questions about how long it would take. Waiting was part of eating. As the food warmed, its smell slowly filled the room. It did not rush ahead. It arrived gradually, settling into the air and staying there. A bowl was set out. Then another. They were placed carefully, each making a quiet sound as it touched the surface beneath it. Nothing was stacked too high. Nothing was dropped. The fire continued its low work. The pot responded, beginning to release a gentle sound of its own. Not boiling yet. Just moving toward it. When breakfast was finally ready, it did not announce itself. Someone simply stopped stirring. The spoon was set down. The pot was moved aside. Food was served slowly. Each portion was given the time it needed. No one hurried to be first. Breakfast prepared without urgency tasted different. It carried the calm of the morning with it. People ate quietly, aware of one another, unbothered by the passing of time. When the bowls were empty, they remained where they were for a moment. There was no need to clear them immediately. The morning continued, just as gently as it had begun. The knives were simple and familiar. Their handles were worn smooth, shaped to fit the hand without thought. The blades were not sharp enough to demand caution, but sharp enough to do their work slowly. When the first knife touched the wooden table, the sound was soft and dry. It did not ring. It did not scrape. It rested there with a quiet finality, as though it belonged in that place. Cutting began without ceremony. A blade moved through food with steady pressure. The table answered with a faint, muted tap each time the knife reached the surface beneath. The sound was low and even, never hurried. Each cut followed the last at its own pace. There was no rhythm to keep. No need to finish quickly. The sound repeated itself naturally, separated by brief pauses. The wood bore the marks of these motions. Small lines crossed its surface, layered over years of similar mornings. The table remembered every meal. A second knife joined the first. Its sound was slightly different, lighter, but still soft. Together, they created a quiet pattern, rising and falling without drawing attention. Hands moved carefully. The knives were tools, not instruments of speed. Each motion was controlled, predictable, calm. Sometimes the blade paused, resting flat against the table. When lifted again, it made a gentle sound, wood releasing metal without resistance. No one spoke while cutting. The sound filled the space efficiently on its own. It was not distracting. It was grounding. When the cutting was finished, the knives were placed aside. Metal met wood one last time, then stillness returned. The table waited, holding the echo of each soft tap, as breakfast moved closer to being shared. The chairs were heavier than they looked. Made of wood, worn by years of use, they rested firmly on the stone floor. They did not move unless guided, and when they did, they spoke softly. A chair was pulled back just enough to sit. Its legs slid across the stone with a low, gentle scrape. The sound was steady, not sharp, shaped by smooth stone and careful hands. The person sitting did not rush. The chair paused, adjusted, then moved a little more. Each small movement produced another quiet sound, then stopped. Stone floors carried sound differently than wood. They did not creak. They held the noise close, allowing it to spread slowly and then fade. The scraping never echoed. It simply existed for a moment and was gone. Another chair moved nearby. Its sound was slightly deeper, the legs shaped differently, worn unevenly by time. The difference was noticed only because the room was so calm. As people took their places, chairs shifted once or twice more. Small adjustments. Minor corrections. Each one marked by a soft, brief scrape. No chair was dragged far. That would have been too loud. The movements were practiced, learned over years of shared space. When everyone was seated, the chairs grew still. Their legs rested fully against the stone, weight settled evenly. Silence returned without effort. The stone floor cooled the room. It held the morning's quiet beneath it, absorbing sound as it always had. The meal could begin, supported by chairs that no longer moved, and a floor that listened patiently. Voices did not arrive all at once. They entered the room gradually, as if testing the air before settling into it. The first words were few, spoken softly, shaped by morning rather than thought. No one raised their voice. There was no reason to. Everyone was close enough to hear without effort. Words moved slowly, carried on breath that had not yet quickened. A simple question was asked. Its answer came after a pause, not because it was difficult, but because there was no need to rush it. Silence between sentences felt natural. Each voice carried its own texture. One was low and steady. Another lighter, almost hesitant. A child's voice wandered, stretching certain words, shortening others. An elder spoke with fewer sounds, but more weight. Conversations did not overlap. People waited without realizing they were waiting. When someone finished speaking, the room rested briefly before the next voice entered. Laughter, when it appeared, was quiet and short. A breath through the nose. A small release. It did not break the calm. It belonged to it. Words were practical. Simple observations. Plans that did not require detail. Nothing needed to be explained fully. Everyone already understood the shape of the day. As bowls were lifted and set down, voices adjusted themselves around the sounds. They lowered even further, as if in respect. Sometimes a voice trailed off and did not return. The thought had been completed without needing to be finished aloud. When speaking stopped, no one noticed. The room accepted the silence easily, just as it had accepted the voices. The morning continued, carried forward by low, slow words that left no sharp edges behind. After the last words faded, nothing rushed in to replace them. The silence arrived gently and stayed, stretching itself across the room without resistance. It did not feel empty. It felt complete. No one felt the need to speak just to fill the space. The pause between conversations was expected, familiar, and long. It allowed the morning to breathe. People continued what they were doing without sound. A bowl was lifted, then set down quietly. A hand rested on the table. Someone leaned back slightly, the chair responding with the faintest shift. Thoughts moved more slowly in the quiet. There was time for them to wander and settle before being released again. Many never became words at all. The silence held small sounds within it. Breathing. The distant crackle of the fire. A bird calling outside, then stopping. These did not break the quiet. They belonged to it. Eyes moved from one face to another without exchange. There was understanding without language. Presence was enough. Minutes passed without being counted. The space between conversations lengthened naturally, shaped by comfort rather than pause. When someone finally spoke again, it felt unforced. The silence released them without complaint. Until then, the house rested in stillness, holding the long, peaceful gap where nothing needed to be said. The children did not ask for toys. What they had was already there. The floor, the air, the space between one another. Play began quietly, without instruction. A small object was picked up from the ground. A smooth stone. A piece of wood. It was turned over in the hand, examined, then placed down again. The sound it made was soft and final. Movement replaced noise. Feet slid across the floor. Hands brushed against walls. A child crouched, then stood, then crouched again, repeating the motion without reason. There were no sudden sounds, no buzzing or clicking to demand attention. Everything responded only when touched. Two children sat close together, drawing shapes in the dust with their fingers. The lines were erased as quickly as they were made. No one tried to preserve them. Laughter came and went, brief and light. It did not echo. It did not grow loud. It appeared, then settled back into quiet. Imagination filled the space where sound might have been. A corner became something else. A shadow changed shape. Words were unnecessary. When play ended, it did so without announcement. The children simply moved on to something else, leaving the room as calm as they had found it. The house accepted their quiet play without interruption, and the morning continued, unbroken. The courtyard opened to the sky, wide enough for light to enter and sound to leave. It held the morning air without trapping it. When laundry was brought out, the space adjusted itself around the movement. Cloth was unfolded slowly. Each piece released a soft sound as it opened, fabric separating from itself after the night. The motion was steady, practiced, unhurried. Water was poured into a basin. It made a low, rounded sound as it met the surface, then settled. Hands followed, pressing cloth beneath the water, releasing it again. The sound was gentle and repetitive. Fabric rubbed against fabric. Not harshly. Just enough to clean. The noise was dull and even, almost soothing in its sameness. A garment was lifted, water dripping back into the basin in slow intervals. Each drop sounded the same as the last. No splash was loud enough to echo. Clothes were wrung out carefully. The twist of fabric produced a soft strain, then release. Water fell away, and the cloth grew lighter in the hands. A line waited nearby. Garments were shaken once, twice, then hung. Cloth brushing rope made a quiet sound, barely noticeable. The courtyard filled with these small noises, spaced far apart. Between them, there was open air and stillness. When the last piece was hung, movement stopped. The basin rested. The water stilled. Laundry sounds faded, leaving only light and the slow passing of time in the courtyard. The windows were open without being fully opened. Shutters rested partway, held there by habit rather than design. They allowed air to enter slowly, without invitation or force. The wind arrived gently. It did not rush through the house. It passed along the edges of rooms, brushing curtains, slipping between doorways, touching nothing for long. A thin fabric moved slightly. It lifted, then settled back into place. The sound it made was soft, like breath passing through cloth. Somewhere deeper in the house, the wind found a loose shutter. It caused a faint tap, irregular and calm. The wood responded once, then stilled again. Air moved across surfaces, cooling skin, carrying the scent of earth and water. It brought with it the outside world, quietly. A paper resting on a table shifted. Its edge lifted, then fell. The sound was brief and light. The wind changed direction. Its presence was felt rather than heard. The house adjusted without complaint. Open windows allowed the day to move freely inside. Sound passed through them, entered, and left again. Nothing lingered. Eventually, the wind slowed. The fabric hung still. The house returned to its own quiet. Morning continued, touched by air that had come and gone without asking. The day unfolded slowly, measured not by clocks but by tasks that repeated with quiet precision. Each chore began and ended in its own time, forming a rhythm that was familiar to every hand and foot in the house. Water was fetched, stirred, and poured. Bowls were scrubbed, rinsed, and stacked. Each motion carried its own soft sound, repeated again and again. The house recognized the pattern and adjusted around it, as if breathing along with the work. Hands moved without hesitation. Steps followed paths well worn. The sounds of chores overlapped in gentle harmony, wood against stone, water against clay, fabric against fabric, each contributing to a calm, constant undertone. No one rushed. No one stopped. The repetition was its own measure of time, a quiet pulse that filled the morning without needing to be noticed. By the middle of the day, the rhythm had become steady, predictable. Tasks merged with motion and breath, forming a gentle music of habit. The house rested in it, supported by the quiet certainty of repeated care. Even before the sun fully rose, life outside the house stirred quietly. Somewhere beyond the walls, animals moved with purpose. Or with none at all, creating faint sounds that drifted into the morning. A dog barked far away, its voice muted by distance. The sound did not startle anyone, it was familiar, almost like part of the air itself. Birds called intermittently, a single note here, a trill there, always spaced and never urgent. Cows shifted in their pens, hooves scraping gently against the ground. Their low, steady breathing joined the chorus, blending with distant clucks and rustles from smaller creatures hiding in the grass. These noises were part of the rhythm of life. They marked the house as belonging to the larger world, a quiet reminder that movement existed beyond walls. No one reacted. No one needed to. The sound simply entered and faded, absorbed by the calm morning. The family continued their slow routines inside, listening without focusing, feeling the world outside pulse quietly along with them. The distant animal sounds were soft companions, steadying the day as it unfolded. By afternoon, the house had grown accustomed to the day's movements. Floors, walls, and beams had absorbed the steps, the sounds of chores, and the quiet voices. Now, in the slower heat of the day, it seemed to sigh softly, settling into itself. Wood expanded gently, releasing tiny creaks as it adjusted to warmth. Stone floors radiated the heat they had held from morning, sending faint vibrations through the rooms. Doors and shutters shifted minutely, responding to the quiet tug of the sun. Inside, the air was still but not stagnant. The house seemed to breathe slowly along with its occupants. Every object found its place. Bowls returned to shelves, chairs rested firmly on the floors, and cloths draped over lines moved only slightly with the breeze. The family's movements had become gentler, unhurried. The clink of pots, the scrape of chairs, the whisper of fabric, all had faded into a steady, calming background. Even when footsteps crossed a floorboard, the sound felt familiar, like a greeting rather than an interruption. The house held all this quietly, its walls containing the rhythm of the day. It was neither awake nor asleep, simply present, supporting life without complaint, without urgency, in the soft, unremarkable passage of the afternoon. In a small room, distant from the bustle of chores and movement, someone sat with a book. The air was still, warm from the afternoon sun, carrying the faint scent of wood and dust. The first page was lifted carefully, its corner brushing against the next. A soft rustle followed as it turned, gentle and unhurried, settling into place. Each motion produced a muted sound, barely louder than the person's own breathing. The next page followed in the same slow rhythm. Finger and paper moved together, creating a quiet, repeating pattern. The sound echoed lightly in the empty space, absorbed by walls and shelves that had held countless books before. Sometimes the reader paused, letting the silence stretch. The page rested beneath the hand, still and flat. The air seemed to hold its breath in those moments, allowing thought to wander without interruption. Other small sounds punctuated the quiet, a chair shifting slightly, a soft creak of wood beneath weight, the faint sigh of someone settling deeper into their seat. The pages continued to turn, one after another, steady, gentle, unhurried. In this quiet room, time moved slowly, measured only by the soft, deliberate noise of paper meeting hand and hand meeting page, until the afternoon deepened and the house continued its calm, patient rhythm. A needle passed slowly through fabric, pulling thread behind it with quiet determination. Each stitch was deliberate, measured, and unhurried, forming a pattern only visible to the patient eye. The soft prick of needle against cloth made a faint tapping sound, almost imperceptible, blending with the distant rhythm of the house. Thread shifted with every motion, creating a muted swish as it followed the needle's path. Hands guided the work steadily. Fingers adjusted fabric, pulled tight, released, and pressed again. The movement was repetitive, calm, unbroken by hurry or urgency. Each stitch followed the last, a quiet procession across the cloth. Occasionally, a small sigh accompanied a pause. Eyes moved from fabric to thread, ensuring alignment, though perfection was secondary to the motion itself. The sound of stitches continued, a steady companion to the slow passing of the day. The room remained quiet, interrupted only by the faintest creak of the chair or the soft scrape of the needle against the frame of the work. Hour by hour, stitch by stitch, time was marked without words, without clock, by nothing more than the steady, soothing sound of sewing. As the afternoon waned, the fabric grew fuller, the thread longer, and the rhythm remained unbroken, a quiet testament to patience and the gentle flow of life in the house. Evening approached slowly, marked by the soft shift of light across the house. From the distance came the first faint sounds of movement, footsteps traveling toward home. They were deliberate, steady, and unhurried. Each step pressed lightly against the path, creating a soft rhythm that grew slightly louder as the travelers neared. Dust rose gently with every footfall, settling quickly back into the ground. The sound was familiar, comforting, a signal that the house would soon be complete with its people once again. Some footsteps were heavy, slow with fatigue. Others were lighter, quicker, yet still measured, moving carefully as if not to disturb the calm. The sequence of steps blended together, forming a quiet cadence that belonged entirely to the late afternoon. Nearby, a dog stirred, acknowledging the approach, its paws brushing the earth with a muted patter. Birds paused briefly, then continued their soft calls. The world outside mirrored the unhurried return of those within. By the time the first figure reached the threshold, the house had adjusted, waiting. Doors creaked faintly as they were opened. The smell of evening and the warmth of lingering day welcomed the returning footsteps. And so, the family gathered slowly, one by one, their presence marked by nothing more than the soft, repeated rhythm of footsteps coming home before sunset, as the house embraced the calm that would carry it into night. As the sun lowered, the house prepared for the final task of the day, dinner. The hearth had cooled since morning, but it still held the warmth of the day's quiet rhythm. Coals were stirred slowly, coaxed back to life with gentle breaths of air. A pot was lifted carefully and placed near the fire. Its clay body made a soft, hollow thud against the stone hearth, answering the fire's faint crackle with a quiet tone. Water was poured in, producing a muted splash that joined the low hum of the flames. Ingredients were gathered one by one. Grain, root vegetables, and herbs were handled with care, producing subtle sounds as each was set down. Nothing was rushed. Each motion had a weight measured by familiarity rather than urgency. The wooden spoon moved through the simmering mixture in wide, calm circles. Its soft scraping against the pot's interior created a rhythmic, soothing sound. Steam rose slowly, carrying the scent of the meal through the room without drawing attention. Sometimes, a small shift of weight caused the pot to tilt slightly, creating a gentle sloshing of liquid inside. Each sound was absorbed by the hearth, the walls, and the stone floor, adding to the quiet orchestra of the evening. As the meal neared completion, the fire glowed steadily, casting slow-moving shadows across the walls. The house held these sounds patiently, the soft clinks, the swish of spoon and pot, the subtle hiss of steam. Dinner would be served without hurry, eaten without rush, and each sound of cooking marked the day's gentle transition into night. The fire in the hearth moved slowly, stretching its warmth across the room. Small flames flickered against the darkened corners, casting shadows that barely shifted as they danced. Each flicker brought a faint, almost imperceptible crackle from the wood. Logs settled into their places, responding to heat with soft pops and sighs. The sound was irregular, never loud, never sharp, just a gentle punctuation to the quiet of the evening. Smoke curled upward in thin, lazy streams, carrying the faint scent of burned wood. Occasionally, a larger branch shifted in the fire, letting out a low groan as it yielded to heat. Sparks lifted briefly, dying almost instantly. Their brief hiss was swallowed quickly by the steady hum of the flames. The fire responded to care, not force. A small stick was nudged into place, producing a subtle crack that blended seamlessly with the constant whisper of low flames. Every movement, every sound, was absorbed by the hearth and the house around it. Even as the family moved quietly nearby, pouring water, stirring a pot, the fire remained a gentle companion, its rhythm unhurried, its crackle soft enough to be more felt than heard. The room became warmer, calmer. The fire did not demand attention. It existed simply, a slow heartbeat in the house's evening, marking the passage of time without urgency. The meal had ended, leaving faint smells of warmth and bread lingering in the air. Dishes, still damp and heavy, waited quietly on the table and in the kitchen. No one rushed to clean them, there was time, and the house had time to hold the sounds of each motion. A bowl was lifted, water poured over it with a soft splash. Soap rubbed gently against the surface, producing a faint, steady swish. Each movement was deliberate, careful, measured to avoid clattering or spilling. Spoons and cups were scrubbed in turn, each one making a muted sound as they met the brush and the stone basin. The noise was repetitive, rhythmic, and oddly soothing in its simplicity. A cloth was wrung slowly, releasing water drop by drop into the floor or basin. Each plop was soft, echoing lightly in the empty space of the kitchen. The rhythm of hand and fabric continued steadily, marking time more than cleaning itself. Dishes were set to dry one by one, each sliding gently across the counter or table. The faint scrape of ceramic against wood added another quiet note to the evening's orchestra. As the last plate was placed aside, the kitchen settled into stillness. Only the whisper of water dripping from cloths and bowls remained, fading gradually into the calm of the night. Cleaning dishes slowly after dinner was not work, exactly. It was a gentle continuation of the day, a quiet ritual that filled the house with patience and the soft certainty of evening. Evenings could hold small joys. A joke, a memory, or a fleeting thought sometimes slipped into conversation, producing laughter that was gentle, quiet, and unhurried. It did not burst, did not demand attention. It simply existed. A child's giggle escaped like a soft breeze, brief and light. An adult responded with a muted chuckle, low and calm. The sounds intertwined without overlapping or rising above the quiet of the room. There was no urgency to laugh. No one needed to fill the air with noise. Each sound lingered just long enough to be noticed, then faded, leaving only warmth behind. Even the simplest amusement, the sight of a pet's slow movements or a clumsy hand brushing a cloth, could provoke these soft, fleeting sounds. They came naturally, without effort, as part of the shared rhythm of the evening. The house absorbed them as it had absorbed everything else. Laughter, though rare, became another layer in the soft texture of the home, adding a human note without breaking the calm, and carrying the family gently into night. As the sun sank lower, the house began to settle for the night. Light softened, shadows stretched, and a quiet stillness moved through every room. Nightfall did not arrive suddenly, it arrived in gentle increments, accompanied by subtle, almost imperceptible sounds. The wind whispered outside, brushing leaves and stirring small branches. Insects added faint, steady rhythms, a low hum that blended seamlessly with the quiet of the house. Even the walls seemed to exhale, holding the day's warmth and releasing it slowly. Inside, footsteps grew fewer. Chairs returned to their places. Pots and bowls rested where they had been used. Each object made a soft, settling sound as it found its evening home. The floorboards relaxed under absent weight, creaking once or twice before holding still again. Voices had faded. Only the occasional sigh or cough punctuated the calm. Each sound was small, deliberate, respectful of the approaching darkness. Nightfall carried its own presence, measured, patient, and without urgency. It was a quiet companion, layering the house in stillness, marking the end of the day not with alarm, but with gentle inevitability. As darkness deepened, doors moved slowly through their final motions of the day. They were not slammed, nor hurriedly pushed. Each door was guided carefully, its hinges creaking softly only once, then settling into quiet. A bedroom door closed with a muted thud, barely louder than a sigh. It separated spaces without harshness, marking the end of activity within. Another door followed, its wooden frame rubbing slightly against the jamb, producing a faint, comforting sound. Even cabinet doors and shutters participated in this gentle ritual. A handle turned, a latch clicked softly, and everything returned to stillness. The house accepted each sound calmly, as if noting the passage of the day and adjusting to the coming night. Footsteps paused after each closure. Silence reasserted itself, deeper than before, filled now only by the soft settling of the house around the sleeping forms within. In this way, doors closed one by one, not as an ending, but as a signal that the house and its family were ready to rest, the gentle sounds folding seamlessly into the quiet of evening. As the evening deepened, attention turned to rest. Beds were prepared slowly, methodically, each motion guided by habit rather than haste. Blankets were unfolded and smoothed, pillows fluffed and arranged with gentle hands. Sheets were lifted, shaken lightly, then laid flat, producing a soft swish as fabric brushed against fabric. Every corner was tucked carefully, every crease eased, until the bed looked and felt settled, ready to hold a sleeping body without resistance. Mattresses, whether straw-filled or simple planks covered in cloth, were adjusted with deliberate movements. The weight of hands and arms pressing lightly produced small, muted sounds, thumps, rustles, shifts, all blending into the quiet of the house. Children watched, sometimes assisting, sometimes simply observing. Their small hands added tiny noises, a blanket pulled, a pillow nudged. Nothing was sudden, nothing was loud. Every motion contributed to the calm rhythm of preparation. By the time each bed was made, the house itself seemed to sigh with approval. The routine of care, repeated day after day, created a comfort deeper than any words. Beds lay ready, rooms quieted, and the family moved closer to sleep, wrapped in the soft, patient sounds of evening. As evening settled over the house, attention shifted to preparing for rest. Beds were not hurriedly arranged, each blanket and sheet was handled with care, moved slowly, and placed precisely where it belonged. Blankets were shaken gently to remove folds, sliding across mattresses with a soft, swishing sound. Pillows were fluffed and adjusted, producing faint thumps and rustles that blended seamlessly into the quiet of the room. Corners of sheets were tucked carefully under mattresses, each fold deliberate and steady. The motions were familiar, repeated daily, becoming almost automatic, yet still comforting in their measured pace. Children sometimes assisted, their small hands producing faint, careful noises, patting pillows, smoothing blankets, aligning edges, never rushed, never loud. The rhythm of preparation was as gentle as the evening itself. When every bed was made, the room felt complete. The house absorbed the subtle sounds of this routine, settling into stillness, ready to carry the family through the night in quiet comfort and calm. The house had grown still. Doors were closed, beds made, and the day's work completed. In the darkness, only the sound of breathing remained, a soft, steady presence filling the quiet spaces. Each breath moved differently. Some were deep and slow, filling chests with a measured rhythm. Others were lighter, rising and falling almost imperceptibly, like the gentle sway of a calm sea. The sounds of exhale and inhale blended together, overlapping without effort. They created a soft chorus of life, constant yet unobtrusive, grounding the stillness of the night. Every room carried its own pattern. A child's small breath sounded quick and gentle, an adult's deeper and more deliberate. Together, they wove a network of quiet, human rhythm through the darkened house. Even the walls seemed to listen, absorbing the movement of air and life. The sound of breathing filled the rooms completely, marking time not with urgency, but with calm, steady assurance, carrying the house gently toward sleep. With all activity complete, the house settled into its final state of the day. Light no longer lingered, and shadows had vanished into darkness. The rooms were still, untouched by movement, holding only the faint echo of the day's quiet sounds. Floors, walls, and beams relaxed under the absence of weight. Every object returned to its place, every surface at peace. Even the hearth, its fire reduced to faint embers, seemed to exhale softly, carrying warmth without sound. No voices rose. No footsteps crossed the floors. The faint breathing of those asleep filled the rooms with life, but it was soft, slow, and unhurried, a quiet counterpoint to the deep stillness around it. The house existed entirely in this calm, undisturbed state. Time passed without notice. Darkness enveloped every corner, yet the space did not feel empty. It felt complete, held by habit, presence, and the slow rhythm of rest. In the house at rest without light, the world outside mattered little. Inside, the night carried its own weightless comfort, steady and patient, until the morning would come again to stir its quiet life. Even as the house rested, the world beyond it remained faintly alive. The village slept, but not completely silent. Sounds drifted softly through the cool night air, distant and muted, barely touching the edges of the house. A dog barked far away, short and solitary. A rooster stirred in its pen, its low cluck carrying across yards and fences before fading. Somewhere, a cart moved slowly along a cobblestone path, wheels making a soft, repetitive rhythm. The wind rustled through the trees and hedges, brushing leaves together with quiet, unpredictable patterns. Occasionally, A branch tapped a roof or window with a gentle, hollow thump, then was still again. Even these outside noises were subdued, unhurried. They wove into the background of the village, marking life without urgency, without intrusion. Each sound faded almost as soon as it arrived, leaving long stretches of silence in between. The sleeping house absorbed them effortlessly. They reminded the family inside that the world continued beyond walls, yet the calm of night held firm, carrying the village into deep, untroubled rest. The night air moved slowly, brushing against the village with gentle insistence. Wind threaded through trees, bending branches just enough to produce a soft rustle, leaves whispering against one another without haste. A distant dog barked once, then again, its voice carried over yards and fields, softened by space and stillness. Each sound was brief, fading quickly into the quiet night. Occasionally, another bark answered from farther away, creating a faint, call-and-response rhythm that did not demand attention. The trees swayed gently with the breeze, their trunks creaking softly, almost like a deep sigh. Leaves collided lightly, producing a quiet, irregular shuffle that blended seamlessly with the natural hush of the evening. Every sound existed for a moment, then dissolved into the calm. The wind moved on, the trees settled, the dogs' voices disappeared, leaving the village and the house wrapped in slow, patient quiet. Outside noises were not alarming or sharp. They were simply life continuing softly, marking the night with gentle, measured presence while the house and its family remained at peace. Before lights could hum or flicker, nights had their own quiet soundtrack. Shadows and darkness were filled with subtle noises that guided the household through hours without sight or urgency. Water dripping from a roof or spout produced small, rhythmic plinks. The occasional creak of a door or floorboard reminded the house it was still alive, even in the absence of motion. Wind brushed against window shutters or swayed hanging cloth, producing soft, intermittent whispers. Animals contributed their gentle presence. An owl called once from a distant tree, a cat padded across the courtyard, its steps muted by earth, and the occasional low grunt or shuffle of livestock carried faintly from nearby pens. These sounds replaced the artificial buzz of electricity, filling the house with life while preserving the calm of darkness. Each noise was unhurried, spaced, and familiar, comforting in its predictability, marking the passage of time without urgency. In the absence of light, night sounds became companions. They created a quiet rhythm that guided breath and thought, supporting sleep while reminding the family that the world moved gently, even after the day had ended. The house lay still, completely dark now. Eyes closed, bodies relaxed, and the familiar rhythm of breathing carried everyone gently toward sleep. In this quiet, dreams began to form, quietly and without notice. They did not arrive as sudden images or loud stories. Instead, they emerged slowly, like soft threads weaving themselves between thought and memory. Shapes and sounds appeared faintly at first, colors not yet defined, voices not yet spoken, movements not yet fully realized. In total darkness, the mind became aware of its own presence. The faint memory of the day's chores, footsteps, laughter, and quiet noises drifted into the subconscious, blending seamlessly with imagined spaces. Each small memory fed the gentle unfolding of dreams. Dreams moved at their own pace. Some were calm, echoing the slow rhythm of the house, a chair shifting, water dripping, wind through trees. Others were lighter, playful, like the soft footsteps of children playing without toys. All were quiet, unhurried, and unbound by time. The darkness held them safely. No light intruded, no sound demanded attention. Dreams formed steadily, patiently, filling the night as the house and its family rested, carrying everyone softly toward the deepest, slowest sleep. The house had grown completely quiet. Beds held their occupants, shadows clung to corners, and the soft hum of night seemed endless. Yet even in this profound stillness, time continued its steady passage, leaving gentle traces in its wake. A floorboard creaked under the subtle shift of a sleeper's weight. Water settled in a basin, dripping once, then again, each sound small and spaced far apart. A distant wind brushed the roof, lifting a shutter for the briefest moment before it fell silent again. These sounds were not interruptions, they were the markers of time moving forward. No one rushed to respond, and the house did not complain. Each noise occurred naturally, perfectly aligned with the calm rhythm of the night. Even the faint rise and fall of breath seemed part of this quiet orchestration. A sigh, a stretch, a shift, all small, imperceptible reminders that time continued, that life moved steadily even in the absence of conscious activity. Stillness remained dominant, but it was no longer absolute. It was punctuated subtly by the passage of moments, as if the night itself had chosen to remind the house that time, like the softest sound, never truly stops. In the deepest hours of the night, the house seemed aware of its own quiet. Without footsteps, voices, or work to fill the rooms, it began to notice the soft echoes of its own structure, the subtle creaks of beams, the gentle shift of boards, the faint settling of walls. The wooden floors whispered as they contracted and stretched, responding to the lingering warmth of the day. Doors and shutters released tiny sighs as wood adjusted to the cool night air. Even the hearth, long emptied of flames, exhaled softly as stones cooled. These sounds were not alarming. They were the house speaking to itself, a low and constant hum that reminded every occupant of the space surrounding them. Time passed unnoticed, measured only by these quiet responses. Corners and ceiling seemed to hold the sounds, returning them faintly as if to confirm their presence. The house listened in turn, absorbing its own subtle motions and echoing them gently, creating a rhythm only the night could hold. And in this deep, self-aware calm, the family slept peacefully. The house, fully awake yet silent, existed entirely in its own listening, sustaining the night without urgency or interruption. In the darkness, time drifted without numbers, without clocks, without urgency. Hours moved quietly, marked only by subtle changes that could be noticed if one listened closely, the faint shift of moonlight across a wall, the soft settling of a floorboard, the slow cooling of the hearth. Breathing continued steadily, bodies rising and falling in a calm, unhurried rhythm. Outside, the occasional rustle of leaves or distant animal movement reminded the sleepers that the world was moving, though imperceptibly, beyond their walls. No one counted minutes or hours. The night itself measured the passage of time in gentle increments, letting the household flow naturally through it. Even the faintest sounds, the drip of water, a sigh, the soft stretch of a limb, were enough to mark its passing. The house existed entirely in this flow. Walls, floors, beams, and furniture bore the quiet of hours passing without measurement, absorbing and returning only the smallest echoes. By the time the first light of morning approached, the hours had slipped by unnoticed. Time had moved, yet remained invisible, leaving the house and its occupants still calm, still at peace, and still embraced by the soft continuity of night. Before the sun fully rose, the house began to notice the world waking beyond its walls. Soft noises returned gradually, gentle and deliberate, as if testing the quiet of the night before fully entering the day. A rooster crowed faintly in the distance, stretching out the first sharp note, then falling into silence. Birds stirred in nearby trees, their light chirps spaced far apart. Leaves rustled as the wind moved with cautious energy. Inside, the house responded subtly. Floors creaked under small, shifting movements. The faint clink of a pot being nudged on a shelf echoed softly. A chair shifted slightly as someone stretched, easing the body awake. Voices were not yet raised, only whispers of conversation, the gentle clearing of throats, the soft exhale of breath. Every sound arrived slowly, allowing the house to adjust, to absorb, and to settle into the new rhythm. Morning sounds returned one by one, weaving into the quiet stillness, marking the slow and patient transition from night to day, without urgency, without hurry, and with gentle persistence. Light crept in softly, spilling through windows and shutters, touching floors, walls, and furniture with a familiar warmth. The house, still quiet, seemed to anticipate the motions that would soon begin again. Footsteps approached the well, chairs shifted, and the soft scrape of wooden floors marked the first stirrings of the day. Water was drawn slowly, pots and bowls were handled with care, and voices returned, low and deliberate. Nothing was rushed. Each action followed the same rhythm as countless mornings before, habit guiding every motion, and patience shaping every sound. The family moved as part of the house, and the house moved with them, both steady, calm, and unhurried. Outside, birds began their light morning calls. The wind whispered through trees. Even the distant village woke gradually, its faint sounds joining the familiar, gentle hum of life inside. Another day began the same way, quietly, predictably, and patiently. The house, its family, and the world around them continued together, carrying the slow, measured rhythm of life forward without urgency, as if nothing had changed and everything mattered. The day unfolded slowly, as it always did. Meals were prepared without rush, chores repeated their steady rhythm, and voices rose and fell in calm, measured tones. Nothing demanded urgency, and nothing interrupted the quiet continuity of life. Footsteps traced familiar paths. Water was drawn, pots clinked softly, fabric swished in gentle motions, and the house absorbed each sound patiently. Outside, wind, trees, and distant animals marked time in subtle, unhurried ways. Evenings returned to firelight, low laughter, the careful cleaning of dishes, and beds made with care. Night followed naturally, carrying the household into stillness, darkness, and the soft chorus of breathing. Time passed without notice, measured only by habit, presence, and the faint sounds of daily life. And when morning arrived again, the quiet rhythms resumed, unchanged, steady, and familiar. Life continued quietly, again and again, simple, patient, unremarkable, and endlessly comforting. Filling the house and its days with the gentle certainty of existence.